So when you feel like you just can't parent anymore, what do you do? This is the question that I'm going to answer today. My name is Jen Avellaneda. Make sure to stick around till the end for my final thoughts, and let's get started. So what do you do when you feel like you just cannot parent anymore? Maybe you've exhausted all the options that you can think of. Maybe you solicited family or friends or the community around you, and there's just no more support, no more help for you. Maybe you are not in a position to parent the children that are in your care. Maybe that's due to financial loss or emotional distress or a number of other things. And so first, of course, I want to encourage you to find any and all resources that you can. Contact the state and see if there's support for childcare or any other help or avenues that will allow you to be able to keep your kids and maybe give you a little bit of a break. And to see if that would help to give you a reprieve or maybe even respite, which is having the kids go stay somewhere for a few days so that you can just regroup and get out of the forest, if you will, to see if keeping those kids is at all possible. We always want biological kids to be able to stay with bio family if at all possible. If it's a safe place, if it's a healthy place, if it's a stable place, if it's a place that those kids can be nurtured and can grow and can learn, can attend school or whatever they need to be able to grow up in a healthy environment. At times, however, that's just not the case. I know that if you're watching this, maybe you're at the point where you just know that you can no longer parent the kids that are in your care. Maybe you've sought all the help and the services that you can, and it's still not happening. It could be because of addiction. It could be because of maybe mental illness or some kind of a diagnosis. I encourage you first, do what you can, but second, contact your local church, your local community, your local state services to see if you can get any kind of help or support or encouragement for you to move forward. After you've contacted the needed parties, I just want to encourage you to first, don't feel guilt and condemnation. I know a lot of people might want to just keep the kids that are in their care because they feel like that it's the right thing to do or they have to. And in the meantime, kids can truly suffer. They can have scars or permanent damage because they have maybe had inconsistency. Maybe they've been harmed physically or emotionally or even sexually. And it's at those moments that the best interest of the child needs to come first. It needs to come before our own feelings, our own happiness, or even our own wants. True love is always doing what is best for the other person. And so maybe you're at that point today where you know that these children are not best in your care. I'm going to give you a few options of what you can do moving forward when you know that you can no longer parent the children that are under your roof. The first thing that you can do if you feel like you can no longer parent a child and you've exhausted all other resources and you know that that child is not being kept safe or getting the care that it needs. And that first thing that you could do is contact social services. There should be a 1-800 number in your county if you go online and call them and let them know the position that you're in. Maybe you've already used services. Maybe you've already got some kind of support financially or daycare or as far as food stamps go, and you just need more support. If you contact foster care, as a foster parent of 14 years, I know that it's a hard journey. I'm sure you've heard scary stories about kids going into horrific homes or all the bad things that can happen in foster care. But my guess is if you are at the point where you feel like you cannot parent anymore, that foster care is going to be a better option than where they're at right now. I would encourage you to pray like crazy for a good and a godly and a loving and a kind foster home for that child. Maybe Maybe even seek out a foster home on your own. Seek out a family that you know is fostering, have those children relinquished into foster care, and then request from the state social worker to have those kids placed in that specific foster home that you have located. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the state has an agenda that they have to follow. They have rules and regulations. However, again, that child or those children will be safer in a foster home than if they were in limbo or moving around or unsafe in the home that they're presently in. Once kids have been signed over to the state foster care system, there are hoops that you need to jump through. There's going to be court mandated requirements for the primary caregiver of those children. So whether that be a biological parent or maybe a guardian of those children. And so that is just something to be aware of, that those kids, once they're in a system, they will not be able to come back to you very likely in a week or two after that. There are potential or possibilities for those children to be returned to your care. There's also potential for maybe you or the person who's the primary parent of that child to be able to get the services and the help that they need to become healthy and to become happy and able to care for those children and have them return to their care. And that's a good thing about foster care. The other consideration about foster care is that those children will also be required to attend school or daycare or to be in some kind of environment where they're learning, where they're growing. It is the goal of foster care that biological siblings can stay together, that a child remains in a long-term foster home so that they can have some kind of permanency and so that they can build bonds and have a healthy, stable environment that they're in. That is the goal and that is the hope of foster care. And I just want to remind you that the real long-term goal of foster care, it isn't adoption. It's not that there's foster parents that want to take your kid or adopt your child. The long-term goal of foster care, according to the state that you live in, will be to reunify. So to connect those biological kids to their biological family and to have that family be restored once again. Option number 2 for you, if you feel like you just cannot parent anymore, is something that's called Safe Families. I'm going to link the website below in the description so you can learn a little bit more about it. And the goal of Safe Families is almost 100% to connect and support the birth family so that they can get the help that they need to have their child reunited to them. And so the difference between Safe Families and foster care is that once a child enters foster care, that child is signed away. So it's basically a ward of the state. And so the state will meet the needs of the foster child, take care of the foster child, and then the biological family will work independently to be able to grow and become healthy. And then at one point, the goal is reunification. But with Safe Families, those children are still in the legal care of the biological family. Safe Families is not a long-term option. Some kids stay in Safe Families for a year. Kids that are under 6 years old, the average stay is only 9 days. And nationally, the average that kids are in Safe Families is for 45 days. The biological family and Safe Families and the host family really become one. So they're connected and they support one another and they work together for the best interest of that child. Unlike foster care, host families and Safe Families, they don't have any financial support. They're just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. So they welcome kids into their home for maybe 6 days, maybe 9 days, maybe 45 days, or maybe even a year, while you as the biological family can really work on what you need to work on to be able to get to the place where you can feel like you can safely parent your biological kids. Sometimes Safe Families is when maybe a mom has had a baby or there's health conditions of that baby or maybe of the mom and she needs some time to really just regroup and focus on herself. Safe Families will have a host family that will step up. They're surrounded by support from their local church. They will get respite. They will get food and just a community around them, gathered around them to be able to best take care of your child. And you will have contact and connection and an ability to reach and to see your biological child. And so that's a little different than foster care, because foster care, there are regulations, there are time frames of when you can see your child, and those will change depending on the progress that you personally have made. Again, the goal of Safe Families is not adoption. It is simply to help you as a biological family. I know that I just spoke with someone a few minutes ago, and they said out of the 1,000 families that they've helped, there were only 2 that ended up in adoption. And when adoption happens, that happens privately and independently, separate from Safe Families. So Safe Families, there's no goal for adoption or for anyone to try to take or steal your child. The goal is simply to help you. So depending on where you're at mentally and emotionally and what your long-term goal is for your biological child, Safe Families might be an option for you. And lastly, Safe Families, the training for the foster families in Safe Families, it looks a little different. So it's on average about 6 hours of training. The requirements are not as extensive. Someone could get licensed within a week to be able to do that versus maybe the 6 or the 8 or the 9 months that it might require someone to become a foster family. So if you have children with extensive needs, big emotional needs, or children that need a lot of support, if you feel like you need a lot more support, maybe you have an addiction, maybe you have, again, some mental health issues, and you need a lot more support than what you feel like you could do independently, foster care might be a better option, not only for you, but also for your biological child. The third option for your child, if you feel like you just cannot parent any longer, might be guardianship. And guardianship is a little bit more extensive. It's not necessarily some short, quick fix or a temporary solution while you step back and regroup and evaluate the situation. Guardianship is where you go to a judge and you sign away your rights to the biological children. And so what that means is that person or whoever it is that you choose to have guardianship over your child, it could be a grandparent, it could be a relative, it could be a neighbor, or maybe someone that you just met, that person is going to have legal rights over your child. So they will be able to make legal decisions. They will be able to make health decisions over your child. They will be able to enroll them in school. So it's going to look a little different. You're giving up some of your authority and your say over that child and basically placing custody of those children or that child into someone else's hands. The uniqueness about guardianship is that once a child is in guardianship, that doesn't exactly completely terminate the rights of the biological family. So adoption, when a child is adopted, that family actually loses 100% of their rights to that child. But guardianship, it's different because a biological family, they can work and they can establish some kind of stability and they can petition the judge to be able to have the rights returned back to the biological family. The fourth option, if you feel like you've exhausted every route, you have sought out help and support and services, you've taken a reprieve or maybe respite or maybe used Safe Families or something like that to be able to really breathe and get out of the situation, to be able to evaluate and assess your long-term goals for that biological child or children, the last option, it just may be adoption. So adoption is unique because when you sign a child over in adoption, that doesn't mean that you are the parent still biologically. You are biologically, but not legally. It severs completely your rights to be able to make decisions on behalf of that child. That adoptive family can change that child's name. They can make any decision that they want that they feel is in the best interest of that child. And you will no longer have guaranteed access to that child anymore. Adoption, it can be a heartbreaking and an extremely difficult decision. It can be one that may make you feel like your heart is going to be ripped out. It can be something that makes you question, can you even go on after something like this? And I don't want to speak to your situation. I don't want to encourage you to give your child up to adoption. However, sometimes in some situations, that may be what is best for that biological child of yours. When a child is adopted, you no longer will have legal rights to that child. That new adoptive family, they can change their name. They can enroll them somewhere else. They can move them across the country. They have full full legal access to that child, and your legal rights will be completely cut off. It can feel painful. It can feel hard. However, you know your situation. You know the future that you can give that child. You know how much you've sought out help and services and support. And so you know in your heart what might be best for your biological child. For a family that has chosen adoption for their biological child or their children, there's a couple avenues. There's a couple ways to go about doing that. One is to be able to find a family independently. Find someone that maybe has a lawyer and already has their home study and they're legally able to adopt. There are many sites and many resources to match you with an adoptive family. And I know there are so many families that biologically they cannot give birth to their own children. And so they're seeking out adoption. If you are especially going through an adoption agency, which is another option versus a private adoption, I would tell that agency what it is you request and what it is you would recommend in a future adoptive family for those kids. As you can imagine, adoption is a legal process. It is a very difficult and it can be a long process. Private adoption, it goes a lot quicker. It can go a lot smoother. You will need a lawyer to sign over those kids so that they can have be legally the children of the adoptive family. So I wouldn't encourage you just to dump your kids somewhere or to have everyone babysit and then say that they're adopted. They need to be legally have their name changed into the custody and the authority of adoptive families. And if you don't feel comfortable with a private adoption through a lawyer and a specific family of your choosing, I would contact an adoption agency. Seek them out. They can probably even show you portfolios of interested families. Many of them can have biological children. Some of them just want to grow their family through adoption. A lot of them are usually very loving and open and caring people. They're willing to spend $20,000, $30,000, and $40,000 so that a child will be able to come into their home and they can raise it and care for it. And the chances that you're going to find an excellent adoptive family through private or especially through an adoption agency are extremely high. So these are my final thoughts. As a foster family over 14 years, we have had situations where people have contacted us and wanted to give us their children. It is a heartbreaking situation. It is our goal always to support the birth families, to want to encourage them to keep their biological children, to do everything they can and connect them with resources so that they can parent and be able to long-term see the development and the growth of the children that are in their care. There are times where that's not possible. And I think the most heartbreaking times for us is when you see biological family that are not wanting to maybe access safe families or guardianship or adoption or put their children in foster care. However, these children have instability and they get moved, or maybe they suffer abuse, or they're surrounded by addiction and they don't grow. Kids that have been in homes that are unstable, they experience trauma that can impact them for a lifetime. So I would just encourage you, seek your heart, seek God's will for these children, pray so hard about it, and really search your soul to feel, to be able to better understand what is in the best interest of the child. What is long-term? Is it a short solution like safe families, or is it a long-term permanent solution like adoption? All children deserve safe and loving and stable homes and stable families. If all children deserve permanency and a long-term solution that they can have stability and they can have peace and health and access to education and all the things that another child might deserve. So if you are someone who just feels like you can no longer keep the biological child that you have, please seek out options. There are so many solutions and there's so many positive outcomes for both your child and for you. They are out there. Please find them. And I just encourage you and I wish you the best. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, subscribe below and we will see you next time. Remember, go out, live bold, and be brave.